Okay, we're live.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Dive into World Building. And so today's topic is going to be kind of fun, I think. We're talking about book titles. And this was something that came up. It occurred to me to do this when we were talking about first sentences, because we were talking about how important it is to have, your first sentence, because it's the very first opportunity you have to do world building, and actually that's not true. The very, very first opportunity that you have to communicate with the reader is actually your title. And titles are a little funny because it's one of those things where sometimes pieces of writing can be hard to title, and sometimes they can be easy to title, and some people find it really hard to find titles, and sometimes you find this really great title and then you get into the publication process and other people think another title would be far better. So there are a lot of actually interesting issues surrounding the question of title, and I thought we could just talk about that a bit and see what we can learn. Because titles tend to be at minimum one word long, right? And they do articulate with cover art, so that is an important aspect of the overall external impression of a book. So I guess you could say part of the world building task is taken over on the cover of a book by cover art. I think we can mention that tangentially. I think that's safe. I like cover art too, but I don't think that we have a lot of control over what cover art looks like as authors. We even have control.
Yeah, we do. We may or may not in traditional publishing,
yeah.
But in self-publishing, we do.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's make sure that we fold that in a bit here as we go. So should we start with examples, or should we start with, does anybody have a titling story that they would like to talk about?
I could talk about Haunted a little bit, because...
Okay, that's a title.
Yeah, my book Haunted, which I did self-publish, which was great because I had control over the cover art, and I picked someone that I trusted and just let them come up with a concept and sort of vet that, and it was awesome. But the title for me was a problem because there are so many other books with the title of Haunted, and it was a working title, and then I got to publication, and of course, like, it was vetted by a whole bunch of people, but because of the themes in the book, Haunted was really the only thing that matched what was going on. And some of my beta readers had pointed out that one of the reasons that title works is it's not so much that the people are haunted by the ghost, but the ghost is haunted by the people. So, so that, and I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of books on the title. Like, how does that differentiate? So then it relies on cover art after that to kind of make it stand out a bit.
So I think your point about differentiating is actually really interesting, because there are quite a number of titles that can be common just because they're so short, I guess.
All those YA young adult novels with like one-word titles just so blur together to me, and there'll be like a whole series, and it's just like these one-word titles.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, are you talking about things like Divergent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this whole slew of them where, every single title is just this one-word thing, like matched or something, and you're just like.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. And specifically in the context of what you would say is YA, there are a lot of one-word titles out there, and not all of them are in YA. But one of the jobs of a title is to establish the genre of a book, and that is actually not simply a function of which words you choose, but it's also a function of what titles tend to look like in that genre. And I'm trying to think. I think I saw an example at one point of a book where it was like an article where they said, oh, if this book had been marketed as this other genre instead of the genre that it was, it would have been called this. And I can't remember. I can't remember what it was. But I think there is a pattern towards these one-word titles in YA. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of adjectives.
Yeah.
Adjectives are pretty common in that arena, I think. But I think they may be common everywhere. One of the questions is, what are we trying to do with a title, I guess? And you're trying to, I guess, give some basic intrigue / orientation to somebody who's approaching the book. I mean, you're supposed to be trying to interest people, but you're also trying to not set the wrong expectations.
Yeah.
Setting expectations is really what you're doing. And so setting the wrong expectations can be very problematic. Like, and I wish I had better examples here.
Well, if you had a book like Love's Red Passion, you know, and you're trying to market it as a picture book, or, I don't think hard science fiction people would go for it either.
Mm-hmm.
Some
I can
titles
almost buy that as a vampire book, but
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that romance and westerns are particularly good at titles that just scream that genre. Just reflecting back what Juliet was saying a moment ago, the title, like the cover art, like the back cover copy, communicates to the potential buyer, this is the reading experience you will have in this book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you, as the author, had better follow through and deliver that experience.
Right.
Okay.
That's the hard part.
It's really true, though. If you're titling something one way, and somebody comes to the book expecting epic fantasy, right? And then suddenly the book is hard sci-fi. The people are going to be like, I was erroneously sold this and put it down. I mean, so let me. I'll give you an example. I don't think Janice would mind. The book's been out for a while. An example of a title change that was actually interesting because the title. So this was my friend Janice Hardy's first book. I've mentioned it several times on the program. It's called The Shifter, but actually it's only called The Shifter in the U.S. And in the U.K. it actually has the original title that she made for it, which was The Pain Merchants. Those are two very different titles.
Yeah.
And
Pain Merchants, depending upon whether it's fantasy or a thriller, or
right,
horror, could mean a lot of different things, but it does suggest dark and edgy.
Right, and in a way, and in a way, this is one of the things. This is one of the places where cover art makes a huge difference, right? Because if you title something "The Pain Merchants," and then you give it a YA style cover with with a sense of of foreboding or whatever, then you might expect that this is about drug use.
Yeah,
right?
that would sound like that. Yeah.
Whereas with a fantasy cover, it might be about something totally different. Whereas with a thriller cover, it's so. Basically, one of the things that you're dealing with when you're dealing with a title choice is you're dealing with this phenomenon of word meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I've discussed here before. But whenever you hear a word, in your head, all of the meanings of that word that you've ever heard before are simultaneously accessed in your brain. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they sort of are accessed in an order of importance that is based on how many times you've heard them in that particular context, right?
Yeah.
So in a title, particularly, you're going to end up with these. You have a tendency to find very resonant words, right? Because a word will kind of have right? It has a kind of a resonance to it. It has implications, right? And you're looking for words that are almost, in many cases, almost talismanic.
There's a series title for the shifter.
Yes.
And that appears on the cover, so that's the Healing Wars.
The Healing Wars.
The Healing Wars, that even the Pain Merchants, book one of the Healing Wars, would give you an additional clue to the genre.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah.
I have an interesting sort of story. Years upon years ago, I read the novel Under the Skin, or Under Your Skin, whatever. The one that was made into the Scarlett Johansson movie.
Okay.
And so it was shelved in literary, and it sounded like it was about a serial killer, right? From the jacket description and everything, and even, the title. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this. It's going to be about a serial killer trolling, killing guys in Scotland on these back roads, right? And it was about aliens.
Oh.
Kind of. And it took me, I was over halfway through the book, and I'm like, oh my god, is the alien angle, or is this like her hallucinations? Is this even happening? Is this real? And it was like over halfway through the book before I could believe that it was aliens. And I have to say, I felt like marginally betrayed, just a little bit, because it's like my expectation going in was so far off from what I was reading that, for half the book, I'm like, is she just crazy? What is happening? So it's like I never quite got settled into the actual setup of the book before I'm waiting for do I accept that there are aliens or not? And I finished the book, and it was very good, but it was just what even?
Yeah.
Why was this marketed literary? I guess because he didn't want a genre career, and this was the only book he had about aliens. But it was just what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That'll definitely. Expectations are so strong. You have to address them as soon as possible. Yeah. The later you address them, the more they will cause people to feel betrayed. So I totally see where you're coming from on that. Yep.
I think a lot of that has to do with the contract with the reader, which with the title and the cover art and the back cover copy. And I think you can be mysterious without being mystifying. Mysterious in the sense of arousing the reader's curiosity. But if it's too what is it, the word? Airy fairy pablum, ambiguous, or there's one set of expectations and then the book doesn't follow through with them. Or, I think you could set up an expectation with sort of hedging it. I'm not being very, very clear about this, but using the reader's expectation within the genre. Lots of like the movie The Sixth Sense. Set up an expectation about one thing, and then M. Night Shyamalan, or however his last name is pronounced, does a twist at the end. But it doesn't turn into a movie with aliens or, let's see, ladies in bodices or being ripped open or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought maybe what we should do is talk a little bit about titles that we know and how they fit with the books. So, I mean, the two that I thought of that made an interesting contrast with one another were Hild by Nicola Griffith, which is just a name, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. And I remember when the girl who circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making won an award, and I was there. I remember thinking, this title is going to end soon. And it just kept going. I'm like, really? Really? I mean, when I say it now, it doesn't seem that long. But I remember when I had never heard it before, thinking, girl who... I mean, I was expecting, like, the girl who... one word or something.
Yeah.
It's longer because circumnavigated is a long word.
Yeah,
as title words go. So, especially if you're looking at the cover, it sort of stretches itself out.
Yeah.
That title is practically a full sentence and synopsis of the book.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell the whole story. It just says, this is what I'm going to be reading about.
It's almost like you gave the tagline. Like the tagline is the title. You know,
almost.
It's you get, of course it's not the full story, but it's certainly a lot more of the story than, a one-word title would be.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is going on with the contrast there, in fact, is that Hild is about a girl and her life, right? But it's a real girl, even if this is fiction, and we're going to wait to see what happens, and it's not going to tell us much about what happens with her. It's letting the book tell the story. The interesting thing about The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making is that I think it actually refers back to a particular style of literature.
Yeah.
It's not only that it's a long title, it's also a little bit like those books that, and I think it was, I'm not sure about the time period, but it was certainly going to be early 1900s, or where each chapter would have, in which so-and-so does such and such, and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah, and this, and if you get into the story, you actually find that each of the chapters in that book actually has one of these little titles that says, in which, blah, 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 and tells you kind of what happens in the chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the 18th century, or maybe even before.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
I think it was also when things were serialized, so that you could sort of quickly catch up in like, you know, because like Dickens books were serialized. You know, why is the only thing I can dredge up Varney the Vampire? I think that was serialized. I don't know, but yeah, but like these things where like it would be like where you were reading chapter by chapter every month, and so like the chapter would kind of give you almost like a little, you know, heads up about what happened last time and what's happening this time.
Well, it's possible. I don't actually know if that's the case. It would be possible to go and look it up. But what I did want to say about this particular book is that having a title like that, I think, makes a kind of reference back to this particular style of literature, and so sets up expectations very well, since when you open it up, that's exactly the type of literature that you're working with. It's a literature that is informed by that style, that classical style, right? And also modern. This is why Catherine Valente is so awesome. Modern, and yet also carries a great deal of the feelings and the, dare I say, baggage of that earlier style of literature, right? And when you're talking about setting expectations, it's beautifully done.
Although I feel like since it's a middle grade book, you have to be like you're setting up the expectation of the parents. The kids aren't gonna get it.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's always a big question what kids are going to get, and what kids are going to get is going to depend on what they've encountered previously. But at the same time, you can build a net starting at one point or at another point. And so, in fact, you're working on building the same set of expectations, but you just might start in a different spot. Because there are those associations, and they will come out in discussion, or they will come out in later experience, or that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, yes. But at the same time, when we're dealing with middle grade, a lot of what we're looking at is actually who's buying the book.
Yeah, the parents are buying the
book.
book.
The parents are the ones buying the book, and they're the ones who have the expectations. And actually, that may indeed connect back to the question of The Shifter, which was an upper middle grade book. When it was written as YA. When Janice originally wrote it, she had intended it to be YA, and it was a little edgier, and they de-edged it a little bit, just a little. But I actually think, I mean, it's got a lot of really tricky issues in it, and it's very interesting. So, you know, it's interesting how people define the distinctions between these age groupings. But yeah,
I'm thinking about the girl who circumnavigated fairyland, yada yada yada. It is very unlikely that there is a second book with that same title. And
the second book, yeah.
Yeah, it's so specific.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of titles which we've talked about it, they could mean anything. There could be, even within a genre, there could be 50 books with that same title.
Yeah.
And then when we were talking about one-word titles, I was thinking of things like Komar or Sita Ganda, Lois McMaster Bujold's, or Miles Burkosigian books, and there is not going to be another book like that.
Right.
The name is specific. Or my first published novel, Jadium, as far as I know, there has never been another book named Jadium, because I made the word up.
Yeah.
And it also happens to be a good title for the book, because it's
yay.
It's a major theme running through the whole thing.
Well, so let's talk about that though for a second. What kind of expectations are you getting if you're dealing with a book that has a one-word title that's not in English and not in any Earth language, right?
Well, I think part of it is how we as English speakers or primary English speakers perceive collections of letters.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, with the apostrophes or too many consonants or too many, especially Z's and Y's and things like that. I think words have emotional tone to them.
Mm-hmm.
Look at words in like Tolkien's Quenya and the way he has vowels and stuff like that. It has a certain emotional communication. So his words in Black Speech have a certain emotional connotation. Communication.
So some of that is going to come from our general sense of onomatopoetic speech.
Yeah. And also how close the made-up word is to actual English words. I mean, one of the reasons that I called the mineral jadium, I use the IUM because a lot of elements and minerals have that suffix.
And also there's jade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was the other thing I was going to mention is the way that we pull information out of what is otherwise nonsense words is that we do a couple of things. There's the onomatopoetic angle where we have these associations of largeness or smallness or texture of various things that come from a general sense of onomatopoeia, and then there is the additional, how does it compare to words that I know? Does it sound like words that I know?
Mm-hmm.
The ium aspect of it is a morphological aspect. So people may say, "Oh yeah, I know that suffix," right? Or
so the word is friendlier then.
Maybe not, but yeah. So there are a number of ways that people try to parse words that they don't understand, and possibly that they can't understand. Yeah. So let's see. I think we could say that there are several types of titles. There are titles that make reference to characters in the story. There are titles that that use a quotation out of a story.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a reaction to that. It used to make me mad when I'd be reading a book, and there would be a title that was directly from a line from the book. I'd be like, "Oh, you kid!" I would I don't know why. I don't have that reaction now.
Well, it's funny.
It's a funny thing.
Yeah, some of those quotations are more direct, and some of them are less direct. I mean, there are also titles that reference theme.
Yes.
Things like Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
You know, I was actually told by a reader that one of my precious people who has actually already read my novel that he was really enjoying the book but hated the title. And I was like, okay, and he was like, well, because I don't like thematic titles. I was like, okay. Do you have any suggestions? Well, what's interesting is when you get into suggestions, then you start looking at the options, and it starts getting all wonky, right? Because with this particular book, one of the interesting questions about it is, what genre does it really fall into? And one of the reasons why I picked a thematic title is that the thematic title does not actually require it to fall into a particular genre.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting to see if and when it gets picked up how people approach the title question, because and it will also reflect how they're approaching the genre question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
talk about our own work. Another titling experience was with my short story collection, which, Aliens in the Soda Machine and Other Strange Tales. And that, I mean, it is the title of a story, but there's a lot, it's weird fiction, and it doesn't easily fall into categories, although you'll definitely find urban fantasies, find something a little more literary. But for me, that was like, it was a no-brainer, just because it was such an odd, the title story is very strange, but it's also an indicator of the kinds of short stories that you're going to see. They're things that, I mean, I guess you would call it, I wouldn't say bizarro, but maybe new weird fiction. It doesn't get quite as dark.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to look at a couple more actual titles. And I wish I could remember what N.K. Jemisin said. She had thought of as the title for one of her books. But I mean, I really think that those titles are fascinating. So like the 100,000 Kingdoms, I think is a really interesting choice for a title for that book. And I think she said, I don't want to be wrong. I think she said something like it. Let's just not make this a quote. I don't think I may have it slightly wrong, but she said that she had thought of something like the Night Lord's Lover or something like this. But that it was really not, appropriate for, I think, the genre that was intended, and it gave people certain kinds of expectations that they thought were very wrong for what the book was trying to do. Thousand Kingdoms is a really interesting choice, I think, because it suggests, well, I don't know. I mean, it suggests a lot of diversity, right, in a way.
Well, I think, like, when you do Kingdoms, it sort of is automatically fantasy, like you know, because that's where kingdoms show up. I mean, you know, yeah. So it's like, okay, it's fantasy. I know that much. Let's read the book jacket, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it also suggests scope, because you know, if you're looking at 100,000 Kingdoms, you're looking to see what this giant world. You're expecting a giant world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would sort of. I think I would expect something of a globe-trotting, epic travel tale, sort of, with that.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome.
Yeah, you know. So it's like you are automatically gonna set up some.
But the choice of number is actually really interesting too.
And I would assume that has some meaning in the book.
Well, I mean,
really? Oh no, it doesn't. Oh.
Actually, what I was gonna say is that when you pick a number like 100,000, it's almost like an invocation rather than a number, right? 100,000 is a name that is a number that you would apply if you really didn't know the number, but there were lots and lots of them, and you wanted to get the sense that it was this sort of magnitude, but you didn't actually know the right number.
Yeah, it's actually 732, but you want to say it's a lot.
Exactly. This magical, I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like the way we say, wow, I have 20 reasons to be mad at this, and not 7.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my gosh, this is 100 times better, as opposed to this is 2.5 times better. Right? So, yeah. So I love the evocative inexactitude of it, which does a very different thing. And I think
17 Kingdoms would be a totally different story.
Sorry, 7?
Yeah.
I said if you said the 17 Kingdoms.
Exactly. Then you'd expect to hear about all 17 kingdoms.
Yeah.
Or maybe a story collection, yeah. So here's a title that I just thought of that I think is really interesting and unique, and I just grabbed the book. That's what that big, my face gigantic in your screen was. Who Fears Death?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
4. And it's a brilliant, I think it's a brilliant title. And it's interesting because it's active.
Yes.
Which usually it's like the title of nouns or like the nouns and the thing.
Yes, yes. Nouns versus, there are a lot of nouns and there are a lot of adjectives.
Yeah, but the expectation, I think it's an interesting title that works really well because of the content of the book, but it also sort of confounds your expectations, but also works very well with the cover art.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a typical urban fantasy sort of title.
Right. And I think actually that's very cool, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up, because part of speech and what the title is doing is actually a really, really interesting aspect of titling that we haven't talked about yet. So if you can actually find an unusual grammatical formation for a title, it will stand out. Right? The first one I remember, this is the title of a film. Do you remember the film Raising Arizona?
Yes.
Okay. I remember thinking, whoa, a title that's like a verb! and the fact that it was Raising Arizona, I mean, I had no idea what it meant. I was like, my thesis advisor had this great thing that she always used to say, which was she would say, yes, but what does it mean? and that in itself can give you a huge amount of curiosity, right? Because I believe the movie was about raising a child whose name was Arizona.
Yes.
Right? And since then, a lot of those titles have now been done. So it's a little bit less innovative than it was when that movie came out. But you still don't get a lot of verb titles. I mean, there's still a lot of titles that are the noun, right?
Mm-hmm.
The noun.
The happening.
Or the adjective noun, right?
Or the noun of noun.
Right, exactly. Noun phrase, right? The Winds of Kalikovo.
The Age of
Really
Ultron.
awesome book, right? Fun title, says some neat things because of the words wind, because of Kalikovo and the kinds of things that it does to our little brains going, what's that mean, right? At the same time, though, it's a noun phrase. And noun phrases, I think, are the most common type of title. So,
yeah, the one you cited is good because it has specificity to it. Mm-hmm. I inherited a title. The last Darkover book that was published was The Children of Kings. I did not come up with that title. I think it's an awful title, but when I took over co-authoring with a dead author, the Darkover novels, there was a book by that title that the previous ghostwriter was supposed to write. And it had already been publicized, and fans expected it. And, I'm just sort of throwing up my hands and saying, I know the next story in the timeline. What does this have to do with Children or Kings or Children of Kings? And the tendency then is to distort the story to fit the title, and I really think that's ass backwards. And anyway, I hate the title because it could mean anything.
The advice is don't distort the story to fit the title.
And if you enter it on Amazon, there's a Star Trek episode, I think First Generation, original Star Trek, that comes up along with it, and it makes about as much sense there as it did for my book. Anyway, but I got this great cover that was very specific, and I think that rescued it.
Yeah, interesting.
Make a big difference one way or the other. I have a title that goes with the story I'm writing. I just thought of it. So what would the difference in your expectations be between to become the house and becoming the house?
Become the house versus becoming the house?
I think it's to become the house. I would think to become the
Yeah.
house is literary. That's what I would think.
Hmm.
I don't know why, really. I couldn't identify what the function is.
Mm.
Makes me think that.
Ah,
I
okay.
would. I don't know. I think like when it's that close, pick the one that you like sounds the best.
Mm.
I think.
Well, I mean, there are metrical considerations in something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Those are two. They mean different things, and they imply different things. To
Yeah.
become the house is almost like there's an instruction. It could be instructional. How to become the house in one easy lesson.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Right.
whereas becoming the house, is the active process.
Yeah, and actually, let me add to that, Raj. I think that when you say to do something, it can imply intent.
Mhm.
That's what I was getting, yeah.
Yeah. So, you would expect that intent is involved in the first one, whereas in the second one, it might be against your will.
Exactly.
And to become the house has intention, but it leaves completion ambiguous.
Yeah.
Whereas becoming the house, it seems more complete to me.
Well, it seems like maybe not complete, but certainly started.
Yes, yeah.
It's not clear whether you've started or whether you're going to start in the first one, but in the second one it seems that you have started, though your completion is still in question.
Yeah, yeah.
Wasn't that a mid-century modern Kafka story?
Becoming the house.
Well, it's better than
Metamorphosis.
becoming.
Yeah, it becomes a cockroach. Gregor Samsa.
But wait, what was the Kafka? That particular Kafka story?
Yeah.
Metamorphosis.
What?
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis.
I'm making a joke on metamorphosis. Now I kind of wish I hadn't.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just looking around to see if I can find a title. I'm looking around for non-noun titles, and it's actually really hard to find non-noun titles. This is okay. Well, so here's an interesting one. Night Shifted by Cassie Alexander. That form of a verb is actually more like an adjective in characteristics, but it is still a verb, and it does some interesting things. That particular one is playing with the night shift, and so this is actually kind of interesting because it refers to different idiomatic things. So it refers to the night shift. But also to night and to shift and to shifted. And I don't think it would actually refer to shift as a verb unless it had that past tense ending on it.
By the way, I've just looked at the library that I have in here, and I found quite a few. Roger Zelazny has some, but Tim Powers has quite a few that aren't nouns.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always things like "Repent, Harlequin," said the TikTok man.
To die in
Also a long title.
Very specific, though.
Yeah, and it's a quote. It's like a whole line.
A lot of the verb titles that I keep coming up with, the word could be a verb or a noun, and
right.
So it's a little frustrating.
Yeah, I remember being very confused by Watership Down. Because at the time I didn't know what a down was. Yeah. And it could have been like Black Hawk Down as far as I was concerned, right? So that was a tricky one for me.
Now I show. Do it. Look at that. It's Wild Ducks Flying Backwards. That's a whole title. I mean, a whole sentence.
Ducks Flying Backwards?
Wild Ducks Flying Backwards. Tom Robbins' book of essays.
What's it? Say it again.
Wild Ducks Flying Backwards.
Oh, that's still a noun phrase, even though it has a verb in it.
Yeah.
It's like wild ducks that are flying backwards, but it's still interesting because it has a verb in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Even if the word is grammatically filling the role of a noun or an adjective, if it's a form of a verb, it carries a different weight or different implications.
Yeah.
On Stranger Tides is an interesting example.
Ooh, preposition and phrase.
And then there are titles that are quotes or lines out of poems.
Lots of Shakespeare there. Lots of King James.
I'm gonna remark on To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
That goes back to our intent question, right? Or in this case, it's a quote, right? It's a reference to a quote.
Yeah.
It's an indirect reference to a quote. So it's actually, does something interesting.
I can think of a lot more verb titles for movies than I can for books.
Well, movie titles, because a movie is clearly in motion, and movies that don't have a lot of action, whether it's gratuitous violence or actual movement of the body, have to be active, and so the title is likely to be needs to be more active, I think.
Well, it's interesting because some titles seem
in TV.
In a way, we put a lot of trust in titles because a title is going to tell us what we're going to expect. And I think that sometimes when I'm looking around at things that people ask me to look at, and I see a title, sometimes I look at the title and I think to myself, this person doesn't know what the story is about. Do you ever have that sense? And I'm not sure how to put my finger on it, because I'm not sure how to put my finger on it, but I think that the more vague a title is, I don't know, it can come across as non-deliberate, as though, maybe it doesn't set up the expectations that I think I want it to, or it doesn't set up very specific expectations. I think this is what you were mentioning with The Winds of Kalikovo. It's a great title because, number one, Winds is great, and it refers to something specific in the book. Kalikovo has got all kinds of cultural information in it, in addition to just being kind of cool sounding. But yeah, so look out for things that are not, I guess, specific enough. I guess Children of Kings, they're both of those key words, children and kings, are very common words and kind of generic.
Yes.
And so they're not really giving you a lot to work with.
And it doesn't say, it doesn't communicate in any way that this is a dark over novel. which
That's also true. If you have a particular series, well, series titles is another whole question, and we're running out of our hour.
Yeah.
But you tend to find that in series you have similar titles in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases you have similar titles where the titles will be similar in their grammatical format, right?
Like Harry Potter. Harry Potter and the blah, blah, blah.
Harry Potter and the blah, Harry Potter and the blah. Yes, definitely. But I'm also thinking of Divergent and the ones that came after it, which were, I can't remember what they were, but they all ended in ent.
Yeah.
Right?
Divergent and...
Or Gail Carriger's series is sort of with soulless.
Yes.
Yeah, blameless.
Soulless, blameless. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I actually think those are very effective titles. Because they definitely encourage you to see those books as a coherent group, right? Yeah. Well, so it's 10:59, and this has been really much more interesting than I even expected. So, I think we covered a lot of really interesting things.
Do this one again.
I mean, it makes me want to go and think more about titles. Anyway, yeah. So I guess we should bring the discussion to a close. I almost feel sad doing it because I just thought it was pretty interesting. But any last thoughts?
The bird, a lot of them. You can't hear it.
Actually, I either come up with a title right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes before I actually start writing, I just know that this story or this book is got this title, or I'm completely stumped and everything that comes to my mind is absolutely awful. And so one of the techniques that I use is I like to do this handwritten rather than on a computer. I just take a pad of paper and I keep writing out ridiculous titles. As ridiculous as I can get them. And it's sort of like I go through all my ridiculousness, and then several pages later, some good stuff starts coming up.
Yeah. Just writing out a lot of titles can help. And actually can get you onto new ideas and stuff, or new keywords that you might like to use, that kind of stuff. And the other thing that writing things down can do is it can help you to see all the possible implications that you're referencing in any particular title. Yeah. I confess to a certain degree of hope that my title for my book will actually manage to stick, because it's grammatically unusual and I like it a lot, which is For Love, for Power. For love, comma, for power. It's not a format that... the problem is that it doesn't actually read particularly easily, so it may end up disappearing. But it also has some interesting implications that I like, like purpose and conflict of interest. So, yeah, it's interesting. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. Wow, what a lovely group of people we had.
A few animals, too.
And a few animals and some cups of tea. So, all right. I guess, so let's see. Next week, I think we're going to talk about idioms.
Oh, that'll be a good one.
Idioms.
Finally.
Yeah, well, I know it's been kind of hanging in my brain for a while, but I think it's time. It's time to do idioms.
Yay.
So, yeah, next week we'll be at this same time, and we will do idioms, and it should be a lot of fun. If you can collect some idioms that you enjoy from books before you come, I'm assigning homework now. I'm actually telling you the homework that I'm going to assign myself for the Hangout, so if you'd like to join me in doing some homework, that would be awesome and make things more interesting. Yeah, and as soon as I have my next guest worked out, I will, confirmed. I will let you guys know, but I haven't got that quite confirmed yet. So I will just say I'm talking to some very cool people, and you should totally excited about this. Anyway, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.